And for more insights, earlier my colleague Juliet Mann spoke to Doris Liew, an economist who specialises in South Asian development.
I see now it's like a counterbalance against the United States because Trump has imposed his tariff globally, in fact, and specifically targeting China. And China will see Southeast Asia as a low-hanging fruit to exert its influence. And in fact, Southeast Asia has received a lot of investment and trade from China in the recent years. So we see China is using Southeast Asia to anchor U.S. rise and expand its sphere of influence.
So you're saying the message coming out of these talks is geopolitical rather than economic, or is it a bit of both?
For ASEAN, the stance appears to be economical because China is one of the largest trade partners, and it seems to be quite strategic for ASEAN to be closer aligned with China to get more trade and investment opportunities. For China itself, however, the intention seems to be a bit more geopolitical, of course also empowering geoeconomics to a certain extent, but ultimately right now it's about the rise of China encountering the U.S. narrative. So I think China is just using this as an opportunity to exert its influence. And we see China is a little bit different from the U.S. in terms of its approach, that China used a lot of economic and trade as a way to exert its influence by building infrastructure, by building up investments, and so on and so forth. Yes.
It is, though, the first ever three-way summit with the 10-member regional bloc and China and the GCC Gulf states. I mean, there's strength in tech, in energy, and in security there. So where do you see the synergies between those three blocs coming together?
I see the GCC itself is not something new. Since the beginning of ASEAN chairmanship for Malaysia this year, actually the ASEAN-GCC free trade agreement has been in discussion for about almost half a year right now, and now it's just accelerating that process to formalize it into a free trade agreement. And GCC countries, the Gulf countries, they have been trying to diversify away from oil and natural resources-based economy, and Southeast Asia is a region that is very attractive to them, and it's a new region, new trade areas that could benefit both regions.
Now, both President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang have travelled to Southeast Asia in recent weeks. What would you say this high level of diplomacy signals about China's broader strategy in the region? China
wants to tilt Southeast Asia towards its sphere of influence rather than the U.S. And we've seen that in the past, we've seen some fragmentation between different ASEAN member states like Vietnam and Philippines, who are more aligned with the U.S. because of the trade and because of geopolitical implication and security issues with China, and that's why they are tilting towards the U.S. But with the tariff in place, I see China as trying to mend the relationship.